let's talk about Ben Simmons for a second. Uh, Tommy and I went on the Green Light Pod, and I defended Ben. Um, I I couldn't help but feel bad for him in Game 7, and you played with him for a couple years when we were teammates in Philly. I go back to something Doc said earlier in the season, and he's had to deal with this. Why doesn't he shoot? Why doesn't he shoot? Why doesn't he shoot? For the last 4 years. But Doc said something along the lines of like, let's appreciate Ben for who he is. Let's appreciate his own greatness. Do you think, certainly on Twitter to an extent, he would have found this amount of ridicule, but do you think if he wasn't in Philly, his life would be a little bit easier?
From playing in Philly, they let you know about it every single night. They let you know how they feel. I certainly think if he was in a smaller market where, they weren't so passionate about their sports teams, I think his life would be different. But I completely agree with Doc. Like, after having a front row seat watching Ben, he like defies gravity, physics, and all the above. Like, you sit there and you're like, this guy's incredible. The way he's able to see the floor out in transition, in my personal opinion, he's one of the hardest guys to stop in the entire league. And I personally think it's unfair what's happening to him. Does he need to shoot more? Sure. But like, he's not, to me, the single-handed reason that they lost. And, I really feel bad for him.
JJ, can you explain, we were talking about this yesterday, but can you explain just to our audience the amount of shots that he creates for other people? I mean, you guys both were beneficiaries of this to a certain extent. JJ, obviously, he got you a lot of open looks. But like how he does that in a way, because I think it's a thing that, a casual fan may not necessarily understand when you're watching their games.
Well, to be very clear, TJ doesn't shoot threes. TJ doesn't shoot threes. So Ben didn't create a lot for TJ.
Yeah. So
TJ's just hanging out in the dunker.
That's the thing. Like, JJ is so spot on. It's not like I was getting floppy action ran for me and he was getting me the ball. But in the open floor, he commands so much attention. And when he's driving to the basket, and people have to collapse. And when he does, his vision is just absolutely incredible. At his size, for how quick he is, you shouldn't be able to do the things that he's able to do. And his vision is some of the best in the league. And it's incredible to watch. And, even in the Game 7, I think it was overshadowed by the amount of shots that he took, but he had 13 assists. And in my personal opinion, I think that's quite easy for him to do on a nightly basis.
Yeah, people talk all the time about being able to create your own shot. Ben creates shots. He just does it for other people. And if you look at it statistically, I can't remember the exact stats, but I know there was a big article earlier this season. If you look at over the last several seasons of the NBA, Ben has created more wide open threes for his teammates and more makes from three from his teammates by a huge margin relative to anyone else in the NBA. So he is a creator, just not in the traditional sense of I'm going to ISO and get to the mid-range and get to my spot and pull up. But the one thing I'll say is, and this is not a knock on him, this is just we're explaining who he is as a player. Some of it is in the playoffs, you need to be able to create a mid-range shot. And if you look at the teams that are now in the conference finals, with maybe the exception of Atlanta, all those teams have guys that thrive in the mid-range, whether it's Kawhi, PG, Drew, Chris Middleton, Devin Booker. Like we talk about layups, we talk about getting to the foul line. You've got to be able to shoot mid-range shots in the playoffs, which you kind of do very well.
Thank you for saying that, because from someone that shoots the mid-range a lot, and I would like to say at a high percentage, I'm glad that it's being shown that the mid-range is not dead. Because you see all these teams, which is great for you, that are just salivating over the 3-point shot, 3-point layups, like so analytically driven, which I think it's bad for the game, but that's neither here nor there. But
talk your shit, TJ.
But like I said, we were talking about Ben and whatnot. I've seen him shoot mid-range shots, and it looks good. And the fact that, he just has to take them. But other than that, like, he's doing his job, in my opinion. Like in Game 7, Trey was 5 for 23.
Yeah, defensively, people talk about he hasn't improved as a player. I played with him his first 2 years. He wasn't the defender. He had the talent and the potential to be the defender he is now. But his improvement to me is on the defensive side of the ball. There was the potential there when I played with him those first 2 years, and now you're seeing he's an all-NBA defender. He's as disruptive on the defensive end as anyone else in the NBA.
In my personal opinion, I think he's the best defender in the league. I think obviously Rudy Gobert is an elite shot blocker, but Ben guards 1 through 5. And that is, to me, more elite than anything.
We had a conversation back in the fall about certain defensive players of the year have to be hidden in the playoffs, and at certain times they aren't even able to play in the playoffs depending on matchups, which is an interesting conversation to have in general when you think about that award and you realize, we should talk a little bit. Before we get to the Clippers.
Tommy doesn't like to shit on people. He's basically saying Rudy Gobert the last 2 years has been unplayable in the playoffs, yet he was and rightfully so, he was the anchor of a really good defensive team, and a lot of the advanced analytics, defensive win shares bears that out, that he was the best defensive player, blah, blah, blah. I believe in analytics, but at some point, like, we have to acknowledge people like Ben or Kawhi that are not anchors, that are out there guarding Drew, that are out there guarding the motherfuckers, that are out there guarding the Kyries and the Hardens and the Kawhis of the world.
I completely agree. I think Rudy is an elite shot blocker. But to me, the guys that are able to guard 1 through 5, because Rudy's back there to blocking shots, and in that Clippers series, he did struggle to guard, when he had to switch on to other guys. But to me, Ben, and the guy that's not talked about enough is Drew Holiday. I think he's one of the most elite defenders, does not get enough credit ever for his defensive ability. And I know you played with him. He's elite.
This is a Drew fanboy podcast. Everyone comes on. We've had like 7 people. Dame was our first guest from the bubble, and it was like the thing he said 5 minutes in, basically, is that Drew is the person who defends him the best of anybody in the league.
No, I don't necessarily have Kyrie's handle, but guys just don't like take the ball from me ever, and he's done it at least 4 or 5 times this year, and you just feel like a middle schooler, or at least I do when I'm playing against him.